The morning air in rural Tennessee was cool and quiet, the kind of calm that settles over small towns before the day truly begins. Johnny Cash, long retired from the stage, was driving without a destination in mind. He did that often now, not looking for attention, not chasing inspiration, just listening to the silence he once never had time for. Dressed simply in black, with his hat pulled low and dark glasses hiding tired eyes, he stepped out of his truck near a modest construction site on the edge of town. The sound of hammers echoed softly, but beneath it all was something else, something human, a voice, not coming from a radio, not polished, not trained. A man was singing while mixing concrete by hand. Johnny stopped walking. The voice wasn't perfect, but it carried weight. Each word sounded like it had been lived, not rehearsed. The melody was simple, almost improvised, yet heavy with emotion. It was the kind of singing that doesn't ask to be heard. It just escapes. Johnny stood still, listening. The man singing was covered in dust, his skin burned by the sun, his hands rough from years of work. He sang slowly, pouring each line into the air as if no one else existed. There was no audience, no applause, just a man and his song. When the worker paused to drink water, Johnny stepped closer. "That song," Johnny said calmly, his voice low. "Where did you learn it?" The man wiped his forehead and shrugged. "I didn't learn it, sir," he replied. "I wrote it." Johnny raised an eyebrow. "I sing it to keep myself standing," the man continued. "When your heart gets too full, you gotta empty it somehow." Johnny said nothing. He just listened. "And what's it about?" Johnny asked. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. "My wife," he said quietly. "She's been sick for years now, can't go many places, so every night I sing to remind her she's not alone, and that I still love her." Johnny felt something tighten in his chest. "Would you sing it again?" he asked. The man nodded, unaware of who stood before him, and began to sing once more, this time not for himself, but because someone was finally listening. And Johnny Cash lowered his head, realizing this was no ordinary song. The man closed his eyes before singing again, as if the world around him had faded. His voice came out steady, unpolished, but full of truth. "Even when life puts me to the test 1,000 times," he sang softly, "I stay faithful to the woman who still shakes my soul." Johnny didn't move. "I don't have riches, I don't understand money," the man continued, "but I love you with my whole heart, and that part is real." The words hung in the air, heavier than the dust around them. "If your health fails and time turns against us," the song went on, "I'll stay by your side. You are my life. It doesn't matter if the world forgets who I am. As long as you remember me, I'm still here." When the man finished, the construction site felt strangely quiet. Even the other workers nearby had stopped what they were doing, drawn in without realizing why. Johnny looked down for a moment. That wasn't just a song, it was a promise. A vow sung by a man with dirt on his hands and love in his chest. Johnny finally spoke. "Do you really think you sing better than me?" he asked, not mockingly, but with genuine curiosity. The man smiled, embarrassed, shaking his head. "I don't know about better," he said. "I just sing with my soul, and with hands full of concrete." Johnny let out a soft laugh. "Then we're the same," he replied. "You with cement, me with a stage. But the soul sounds pretty familiar." That was the moment the conversation changed. The man still had no idea who Johnny Cash was. To him, this older gentleman dressed in black was just another passerby who happened to stop and listen. And somehow, Johnny liked it that way. "What's your name?" Johnny asked. "Tom," the man replied. "Tom Walker." Johnny nodded slowly. "And yours?" Tom asked. Johnny hesitated. Then, with a calm gesture, he lifted his hat from his head and held it against his chest. Tom's face went pale. You're Johnny Cash, he whispered. The shovel slipped from his hands and hit the ground. For a brief moment, time stood still. Tom froze, staring at the man in front of him as if reality had shifted without warning. The other workers gathered closer, whispers spreading through the site. It's really him, one of them muttered. That's Johnny Cash. Tom felt his chest tighten. His hands trembled, unsure whether to apologize, shake his hand, or step back. He had claimed, half joking, half serious, that he could sing better than Johnny Cash, never imagining Johnny Cash himself would be standing there listening. I'm sorry, Tom finally said, his voice breaking. I didn't mean... Johnny placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Easy, son, he said gently. I didn't come here to be praised. I came because your voice made me feel something. Tom swallowed hard. I don't sing for anyone else, he said quietly. Just for her. Johnny nodded. That's why it matters. After a moment of silence, Tom spoke again, hesitant. If you'd like, you could come have some coffee at my place. It's not far. My wife would be honored to meet you, though she doesn't talk much anymore. Johnny didn't answer right away. He looked around at the dusty street, the half-built walls, the ordinary life unfolding around him. Then he said, I'd like that. They walked together through unpaved roads, neighbors peeking out of windows, murmuring in disbelief as Johnny Cash passed by without security or announcement. When they reached a small, unfinished house, Johnny noticed the where, but also something else. Care. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. In the living room, a woman lay resting on a simple bed. Her face was pale, her body tired, but her eyes lit up when Tom spoke. Mary, he said softly, someone came to see you. She tried to sit up but couldn't. Johnny stepped closer, took her hand with care and smiled. Hello, ma'am, he said. I hear you listen to songs better than mine. A tear slipped down her cheek. My husband sings to me every night, she whispered. His voice is my medicine. Johnny said nothing, he just held her hand, and in that quiet room, filled with love and struggle, the man in black felt something shift deep inside him. They sat around a small wooden table, the coffee steaming between them. The house was quiet, except for the faint sounds of breathing and the distant noise of the street outside. Johnny watched the way Tom looked at Mary, not with pity, but with devotion. It was the kind of look built over years of shared hardship. After a while, Johnny spoke. Would you sing that song again? He asked. For her. Tom hesitated, then nodded. He stood near Mary's bed, closed his eyes, and began to sing once more. This time his voice trembled, not from nerves, but from love. He sang slowly, carefully, as if every word was something fragile that could break if handled wrong. Johnny felt his throat tighten. He had sung in prisons, on grand stages in front of thousands, but this felt heavier than any applause he had ever known. When the song ended, Johnny wiped his eyes quietly. Tom, he said, I don't know what brought me here today. But something tells me this isn't the end of this story. Tom smiled politely, unsure what to say. Johnny stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the dusty road and the modest homes lining it. There was no wealth here, no spotlight, and yet inside this house lived something rare. Have you ever been inside a recording studio? Johnny asked without turning around. Tom laughed, thinking it was a joke. No, sir. Closest I ever got to a microphone was when the news interviewed me after a work accident. Johnny turned back, his expression serious. Tomorrow, he said, you're going to step into one. Tom's smile faded. You're serious? I've never been more serious, Johnny replied. That song needs to be recorded. What you have, you can't teach it. You don't rehearse it. You live it. Mary opened her eyes, mustering her strength. Tom, she whispered, you dreamed of this once. Tears filled Tom's eyes. He didn't know whether to thank Johnny, question him, or fall to his knees. "What do I need to bring?" he asked. Johnny smiled. "Nothing," he said. "Just your voice and that love you carry." As Johnny prepared to leave, he asked Tom to write down the lyrics of the song. With shaking hands, Tom wrote each line on a piece of paper stained with coffee and dust. Johnny read every word slowly, then folded the paper with care and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "These words," he said softly, "aren't just meant to be sung. They're meant to be lived." That night, Tom barely slept. He sat beside Mary's bed, holding her hand, singing softly so he wouldn't wake her fully. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the next hospital visit or construction shift. Not fame, just hope. True to his word, Johnny returned early the next morning. An old but spotless car pulled up in front of the house, driven by a trusted assistant. Tom stood outside waiting, wearing his cleanest shirt and a pair of worn shoes he had polished the night before. His hands shook as he kissed Mary on the forehead. "This one's for you," he whispered. "Every note." The drive felt unreal. Tom watched the streets pass by as if the world had changed color overnight. Johnny noticed the silence. "You ready?" he asked. "I don't know if I'm ready," Tom replied honestly, "but I'm grateful." They arrived at a modest recording studio tucked between brick buildings downtown. Inside, everything felt foreign to Tom. Glass walls, hanging microphones, cables like veins along the floor. A young producer named Daniel greeted them, surprised but respectful. "This is the man I told you about," Johnny said. "Listen with your heart, not your ears." Tom stepped into the recording booth. The headphones felt heavy. When the technician signaled, Tom closed his eyes and pictured Mary just as she was that morning. And then he sang. The first line came out hesitant. The second came stronger. By the third, the room was completely still. No one adjusted knobs. No one spoke. The producer folded his arms, then slowly lowered his head. In the control room, Johnny closed his eyes. Tom's voice wasn't perfect, but it carried something no equipment could fix or fake. When he finished, silence filled the studio, thick and respectful. Finally, the producer spoke. "This isn't a demo," he said quietly. "It's a testimony." Johnny smiled. "I told you," he said. "The best voices don't always come from stages." The producer asked Tom to sing it again, this time with simple instrumentation. Session musicians arrived quietly, listening first, adjusting themselves to the emotion rather than forcing the song into structure. Tom sang twice more. Each take carried more strength, more truth, as if the weight in his chest had finally found a place to rest. When the recording ended, Johnny leaned toward the producer and spoke in a low voice. "I want this song released," he said, "but not with my name on it. It belongs to him." The producer hesitated. "Are you sure?" Johnny nodded. "The world needs to hear where real love comes from." Before leaving, Johnny asked for a copy of the recording. That same afternoon, he placed it into a small player beside Mary's bed. "Tonight," Johnny said gently, "I won't be the one singing to you. Tonight, the man who loves you most will." As Tom's voice filled the room, Mary closed her eyes and smiled. A tear rolled slowly down her cheek. No stage could have held a moment like that. Days passed. Tom returned to work, mixing cement and lifting steel as always. He had no idea that Johnny, quietly and without permission, had shared the recording with an old friend at a local radio station, one known for late-night programs dedicated to real love stories. That night, the song played on the air. Phone lines lit up. "Who is that?" callers asked. "That's not Johnny Cash," a woman said, "but it sounds like real life. Someone recorded the broadcast and uploaded it with a simple title, "The most honest love song you'll hear today." No video, no promotion, just a voice. By morning, the song had spread beyond the city. Johnny heard about it from his grandson. "Did you post that song?" the boy asked. Johnny smiled. "No," he said, "but I'm glad someone did." Truth, he believed, always finds its way. Meanwhile, Tom had no idea the world was beginning to listen. At the construction site, the days passed like any other. Tom kept working under the sun, singing softly between shovel strokes, unaware that his voice had begun traveling far beyond the streets he knew. Then the jokes started. "Careful, Tom," one co-worker laughed. "Next thing you know, you'll be on the radio." Tom smiled and shook his head. He didn't own a smartphone. He didn't have social media. His world was small by choice. Work, home, Mary. That evening, a neighbor knocked hard on his door, holding a portable radio. "Tom," she said breathlessly, "is that you on the air?" Confused, Tom stepped outside as his voice filled the street. It was unmistakable. His song. His words. From inside the house, Mary listened quietly. When the song ended, she smiled with a calm she hadn't shown in months. "I told you," she whispered, "your love would travel farther than you ever imagined." Tom sat on the edge of the bed and cried, not from pride, not from dreams of fame, but from the realization that his private promise had somehow become a comfort to strangers. Within days, the song crossed state lines. People shared it without knowing his face or his name. Comments poured in. "My husband sang to me like this for 40 years. That song sounds like my parents' life. I don't know who he is, but he sings with truth." Radio stations searched for the mystery voice. Television crews followed rumors. Finally, someone tracked him down. "He's a construction worker," they said. "Works near the old highway. His name is Tom." One morning, as Tom lifted a sack of cement, a black van pulled up. Cameras stepped out. A reporter raised a microphone. "Are you the man behind the song everyone is talking about?" Tom froze. His co-workers stepped back. "Yes," he said slowly, "but I didn't do anything special. I just sang to my wife." "Are you ready for a record deal?" "A tour?" the reporter pressed. Tom looked at his hands, still white with dust. "I don't know how to sing on stages," he said, "but I know how to love in silence." The clip spread faster than the song itself, not because of spectacle but because of honesty. Watching from a distance, Johnny Cash refused interviews, refused credit, and told his team only one thing: "Don't turn him into a show, let him live this as himself." Requests kept coming. Radio stations wanted interviews. Small labels offered contracts. Television producers asked for appearances. But Tom stayed where he always had, by Mary's side. One local station suggested a small tribute. Nothing flashy, just neighbors, friends, and the people who had followed his story from afar. Tom agreed on one condition. "It has to be on my street," he said, "and the first seat is hers." They set up a simple stage beneath a canvas canopy. No lights, no banners, just borrowed speakers and a microphone that had seen better days. Neighbors brought folding chairs. Children sat on the curb. Silence fell when Tom stepped forward. Mary sat in her wheelchair at the front. Tom sang the same song again, not louder, not differently, but with the same promise he had always carried. When he finished, there was no applause at first, only quiet, the kind that means something has landed deep. Mary reached for his hand. "That's you," she said softly. "The man I've loved all my life." A few days later, Tom returned home from work to find a familiar car waiting outside. Johnny Cash stood by the door, hat in hand, older now, quieter. "May I come in?" Johnny asked. "This will always be your house," Tom replied. They sat together over coffee like old friends. Mary rested in the next room, peaceful. Johnny reached into his jacket and placed a small box on the table. "What's that?" Tom asked. "A vinyl record," Johnny said. "Your song. There aren't many. One for you, one for me, and one I left as an offering." Tom touched the box carefully. "I never imagined my voice would go that far." Johnny looked at him with kindness. "It wasn't your voice," he said. "It was your love. That's what moved people." They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need words. Finally, Tom spoke. "I grew up listening to your songs," he said. "I never thought one day you'd listen to mine." Johnny nodded slowly. "Life does strange things," he said, "but it has a way of circling truth back to us." Johnny stood and adjusted his hat, taking one last look around the small room. The house was quiet, filled with the soft rhythm of breathing and the weight of years lived honestly. "I should go," he said gently, "before time catches up with me too." Tom rose, unsure what to say. Johnny stepped closer and pulled him into a firm embrace, the kind that carried respect, not fame. "Don't stop singing," Johnny said quietly, "even if it's only in a whisper. There are hearts out there that need to remember what real love sounds like." With that, Johnny walked out the door and disappeared down the dusty road, leaving behind no cameras, no signatures, only a moment that would never be repeated. Inside, Tom placed the vinyl record carefully on a high shelf beside an old photograph of him and Mary when they were young. He sat by her side and took her hand. "I don't know how much time we have," he whispered, "but every second with you has been my greatest song." That night, there were no microphones, no applause, just two souls sharing silence, the way they always had. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed, radios played, stories spread. But for those who had heard that song, something had shifted. Johnny Cash watched from afar, never stepping into the spotlight. He didn't correct rumors. He didn't claim credit. He only smiled when asked about it. Some songs are meant to be famous. Others are meant to be true. And the truest ones, Johnny believed, don't belong to stages or charts, but to the quiet lives that teach us how to love. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Tom still woke before sunrise. He still packed his lunch in the same worn bag. He still sang softly while working, not because anyone was listening, but because that was who he was. Mary grew weaker, but never alone. Each night Tom sat beside her, holding her hand, humming the song that had once escaped into the world and found its way back home. One evening, she looked at him and smiled. "You gave me a beautiful life," she whispered, "and a beautiful song." She passed peacefully not long after, surrounded by love, without noise or spectacle. Just silence and truth. At her small service, neighbors came carrying flowers, letters, and handwritten notes from people who had never met her, but who had been touched by Tom's song. They didn't speak of fame, they spoke of devotion. Months later, the song still surfaced from time to time, on late-night radio shows, in quiet playlists, in homes where someone needed to remember what love looked like when it stayed. Johnny Cash never spoke publicly about it. But once, when asked in private what he believed made a song last forever, he answered simply, "Truth doesn't fade." Tom never became a star. He never toured. He never chased a stage. But in his small town, people looked at him differently, not as a singer, but as a man who had loved well. And sometimes, late in the evening, if the wind was right, neighbors swore they could still hear a voice drifting through the streets. Not loud, not polished, just honest, because some songs are written for the world, and others are written for one heart. And those are the ones that change everything. End.